What would you do if a billionaire handed you a blank check to save your child, but the price was your very life? Ethan thought it was a miracle when a ruthless CEO plucked him from poverty. He had no idea she was the architect of his greatest tragedy. The eviction notice taped to the apartment door was a bright, offensive shade of pink. Ethan Cole stared at it until the bold black letters blurred. 30 days. He had 30 days to come up with $4,000, or he and his 7-year-old daughter, Chloe, would be sleeping in his rusted 2009 Honda Civic. Ethan dragged a hand down his exhausted face, the stubble rough against his palm. The Boston winter was already creeping through the drafty windows of their cramped apartment, settling deep into his bones. From the bedroom, a dry, rattling cough broke the silence. Chloe's asthma was flaring up again, and her inhaler was running dangerously low. The pharmacy wouldn't issue an advance without insurance, and Ethan hadn't had insurance in over 2 years. Once Ethan had been a rising star in the architectural world, a brilliant structural engineer with a corner office at one of the city's top firms. That life ended 3 years ago when the Interstate 89 overpass collapsed. His wife, Hannah, an environmental auditor working on the site, was killed instantly. When Ethan discovered glaring negligence in the concrete supplier's reports and threatened to blow the whistle, the corporate machinery turned against him. He was framed for signing off on the flawed designs, discredited, blacklisted, and stripped of his license. Since then, he'd been scraping by on cash-in-hand construction gigs. He walked into the tiny kitchen, filled a glass of water, and carried it to Chloe's room. She was curled under a worn quilt, her small chest heaving as she coughed. "Here, baby bug," Ethan whispered, sitting on the edge of the mattress. He handed her the water and the inhaler. 2 puffs, nice and slow. She took the medicine, her breathing gradually easing. "Daddy," she rasped, her blue eyes, so painfully like Hannah's, looking up at him. "Are we going to have to move again?" Ethan forced a smile, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "No, sweetie. Daddy's got a big job lining up. We're going to be just fine." It was a lie, and the taste of it turned to ash in his mouth. The next morning, Ethan was in the kitchen counting out handfuls of loose change to buy milk when his prepaid cell phone buzzed. It was an unknown, private number. Assuming it was a debt collector, he let it ring, but the caller persistently dialed back immediately. With a heavy sigh, he answered. "Ethan Cole." "Mr. Cole," a crisp, professional female voice said. "My name is Beatrice. I am calling from the executive office of Harrington Global. Our CEO, Serafina Harrington, expects you at our downtown headquarters today at 2 o'clock. Ethan froze. Harrington Global was an international behemoth, a real estate and tech conglomerate that owned half the Boston skyline. "I'm sorry, there must be a mistake. I didn't apply for a job at Harrington. I'm blacklisted from firm work." "There is no mistake, Mr. Cole," Beatrice replied smoothly. "Harrington does not make mistakes. Bring your passport and a blank voided check. Dress accordingly." The line went dead. At 1:45 p.m., Ethan stood in the cavernous, marble-floored lobby of the Harrington Tower. He felt glaringly out of place in his faded charcoal suit, the only one he hadn't sold. Security escorted him into a private elevator that shot up to the 60th floor, where the noise of the city completely vanished, replaced by an intimidating, heavy silence. He was led into a massive corner office. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the harbor, was Serafina Harrington. She was a legend in the business world, a 34-year-old billionaire who had ruthlessly expanded her family's empire after her father's sudden stroke. She turned around. She was stunning, with sharp, aristocratic features, piercing green eyes, and perfectly tailored midnight blue couture, but her presence radiated absolute zero. "Sit, Ethan," she commanded, not bothering with a greeting. Ethan took the leather chair opposite her massive oak desk. "Miss Harrington, I'll be honest, I have no idea why I'm here." Serafina walked to her desk and opened a slim silver folder. "I know exactly who you are. You were the lead structural engineer on the Archway project. You possess a unique talent for identifying load-bearing anomalies in aging infrastructure, and currently, you are $68,000 in medical debt, facing eviction, and your daughter requires a daily steroid inhaler that costs $300 a month." Ethan's blood ran cold. His protective instincts flared, his hands gripping the armrests. "Have you been investigating my child? Because if you have, I investigate my investments." Serafina cut him off, her voice devoid of inflection. "I am acquiring a portfolio of legacy properties from a defunct corporation called Croft Industries. These buildings are old, politically sensitive, and riddled with structural inconsistencies. I need someone who can see what standard inspectors miss. And more importantly, I need someone who knows how to keep their mouth shut." She slid a sleek, black envelope across the desk. "Your salary will be $400,000 a year. Comprehensive health coverage for your daughter begins today at noon. Inside that envelope is a cashier's check for $100,000 as a signing bonus to clear your immediate distractions." Ethan stared at the black envelope. It was salvation. It was life for Chloe. But the sheer magnitude of the offer set off every alarm bell in his head. "I don't have a license anymore," Ethan said slowly. "Nobody will hire me." "Why would you?" Serafina leaned forward, her green eyes locking onto his. "Because, Mr. Cole, a man with a license works for the state. A man drowning in the ocean works for whoever throws him a rope. I am throwing you a rope. Take it, and your daughter never goes without breath again. Refuse, and you can show yourself out." Ethan looked at the envelope. He thought of the pink eviction notice. He thought of Chloe's rattling cough in the dark. He reached out and took the envelope. "When do I start?" he asked. Serafina's lips curved into the faintest ghost of a smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "You already have." Within a week, Ethan's reality had violently shifted. The eviction notice was a memory. He and Chloe had moved into a stunning, fully furnished, two-bedroom apartment in Back Bay, entirely paid for by Harrington Global's executive housing stipend. Chloe was under the care of a top-tier pediatric pulmonologist, and her color had returned. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan slept through the night. But during the day, the dream felt distinctly like a come. His workspace was a sprawling, glass-walled office on the isolated 42nd floor of the Harrington Tower. There were no other employees on his wing. His only point of contact was Thomas, a rigidly polite executive assistant who seemed to function more like a prison guard. Thomas managed Ethan's schedule, delivered his meals, and meticulously catalogued every document Ethan requested from the archives. Ethan's assignment was to review the foundational blueprints of the Tremont Tower, a brutalist high-rise constructed in the late 1990s by Croft Industries. Serafina's instructions were specific. Find the dead space. She wanted to know if there were any structural voids, undocumented sub-basements, or sealed maintenance shafts that didn't appear on the city's public registry. For 3 weeks, Ethan analyzed the faded, massive rolls of architectural vellum. He cross-referenced load-bearing columns against concrete density reports. He was brilliant at his job, and soon the math began to talk to him. It was whispering something impossible. "The load distribution is entirely wrong," Ethan muttered to himself one late Tuesday evening, leaning over his drafting table with a magnifying glass. The Tremont Tower's blueprints showed a standard 4-level underground parking garage, but the central reinforced concrete pylons were rated to support massive subterranean compression, far more than the weight of a standard skyscraper. They were designed to protect something deep beneath the basement floor from a catastrophic impact, a bunker. He needed to see the revision logs. "Thomas," Ethan called out to the assistant, sitting dutifully at the reception desk outside the glass doors. "I need the addendums for the Tremont Foundation, specifically the 2022 environmental and soil retrofits." Thomas didn't look up from his monitor. "Those files are classified under Harrington internal security protocols, Mr. Cole. You don't have clearance. I can't map the dead space without knowing what soil modifications were made," Ethan argued, stepping out of his office. "Call Serafina. She wants results. I need those logs." Thomas paused, picked up a sleek black phone, and dialed a single digit. He spoke in hushed tones for a moment, then hung up. "Ms. Harrington has authorized a temporary decryption of the files to your terminal. Do not attempt to print or forward them." Ethan returned to his desk. His monitor flashed, and a heavily encrypted PDF materialized on his screen. He began scrolling through the dense technical jargon, his eyes scanning for the structural retrofit approvals. Suddenly, he stopped breathing. There, at the bottom of a geotechnical soil survey, dated exactly 3 weeks before his wife's death, was a signature. Auditor S. Cole, approved by Croft Industries. Ethan stared at the screen, his heart hammering violently against his ribs. Hannah. His Hannah. She was an environmental auditor, yes, but she had worked exclusively for the municipal government, not for a private, shady conglomerate like Croft Industries, and she certainly had never mentioned inspecting the Tremont Tower. Why was her signature on a document authorizing a hidden subterranean bunker under a building now owned by Serafina Harrington? Panic and adrenaline flooded his system. He remembered the Interstate 89 bridge collapse. The official story was faulty concrete. But what if Hannah hadn't been on that bridge by accident? What if she had been running from something? Ethan glanced up. Through the glass walls, he noticed the subtle, blinking red light of the security camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. It was pointed directly at his monitor. He casually placed a stack of manila folders in front of the screen, obscuring the camera's view. His hands were shaking, but his mind went into survival mode. Hannah had been notoriously paranoid about data security. She used to joke about her digital lockpicks, teaching Ethan basic backdoor command prompts to bypass low-level municipal servers. Harrington's servers were undoubtedly military-grade, but this specific file belonged to an obsolete Croft Industries legacy database. Ethan opened a command terminal and typed in a string of syntax Hannah had shown him years ago. If they just imported the old Croft drives without wiping the legacy admin protocols. The screen blinked. Black. Then green text cascaded downward. Access granted. Ethan's mouth went dry. He was in the Croft root directory. He searched for his wife's name. A single hidden folder appeared. It wasn't named Tremont. It was titled Project Valkyrie. He double-clicked it. The folder contained hundreds of scanned photographs, bank statements, and a video file. He clicked on the video file. Before the media player could buffer, the heavy glass door to his office hummed open. Ethan slammed his laptop shut, his head snapping up. Serafina Harrington stood in the doorway. She wasn't wearing her usual boardroom armor. She wore a dark trench coat, her hair pulled back sharply. The office lights behind her had been turned off, leaving only the blue glow of the city filtering through the windows. "You're working late, Ethan," Serafina said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm, smooth as glass. "I was just finishing up the load calculations," Ethan lied, sliding his hand subtly over the closed laptop. "I found the structural void. There's a level 5 sub-basement under the Tremont." Serafina stepped into the room, her heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. She walked slowly, methodically, until she was standing just inches from his desk. "I know," she said quietly. "My father built it." Ethan stared at her, trying to read her impassive face. "Your father owned Croft Industries?" "Through a web of shell companies, yes," Serafina replied. She reached out, her perfectly manicured fingers lightly touching the lid of his closed laptop. "And I see you've finally found her work." Ethan felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. "What are you talking about?" Serafina leaned down, her face inches from his. The faint scent of expensive jasmine perfume washed over him. "Do not insult my intelligence, Ethan. The cameras flagged your unauthorized network intrusion 3 minutes ago. I know you found Project Valkyrie. I know you found Hannah." Ethan pushed his chair back, standing up abruptly. His fists clenched. "What did you do to my wife? Tell me right now, or I swear to God." "I didn't kill your wife, Ethan," Serafina said, her voice dropping to a fierce, urgent whisper. "But the people who did are coming for me next, and unless you open that bunker for me, we are both going to die." She stepped back, pulling a heavy, suppressed automatic pistol from her trench coat and laying it gently on his desk. "Pack your things," the billionaire CEO said. "We have to leave. Now." Ethan stared at the heavy, matte black firearm resting on his drafting plans. The polished metal gleamed under the emergency backup lights that had just flickered on, casting long, menacing shadows across the office. "Who is coming?" Ethan demanded, refusing to touch the weapon. "And why should I believe a word you say? You've been manipulating me from the second you called my phone." Serafina grabbed the pistol herself, checking the chamber with a practiced, terrifying efficiency. "My father, Arthur Harrington, didn't just build real estate, Ethan. He built the digital infrastructure for a shadow syndicate. Project Valkyrie. It's an illegal subterranean server farm hidden beneath the Tremont Tower. It houses decades of black market financial algorithms, offshore ledger data, and extortion files on half of Washington." She moved to the glass door, peering down the darkened, empty corridor. 3 years ago, your wife was hired by the city to do a standard soil audit for a neighboring lot. She was brilliant. Too brilliant. She detected the seismic anomalies caused by the Valkyrie cooling generators. She dug deeper, hacked the Croft database, and found the servers. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The memory of the day the police knocked on his door, the crushing, blinding grief, threatened to pull him under. "The bridge," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Interstate 89. "It wasn't an accident," Serafina said softly, turning back to him. Her green eyes were wide with a genuine, raw fear he hadn't seen before. "The syndicate's board, led by a man named Richard Caldwell, ordered her assassination. They rigged the concrete pillars with microscopic thermal charges. It was designed to look like a structural failure. And because you were the engineer of record, Caldwell used his media contacts to frame you. They destroyed your credibility so that even if you ever found Hannah's files, no one would believe a disgraced, grieving widower. A profound, sickening rage began to boil in Ethan's chest. For 3 years, he had lived with the guilt. He had scrutinized his own math 1,000 times in the middle of the night, wondering how he had missed the flaw that killed the mother of his child. He had been a ghost, haunting his own life, while the men who murdered her sat in corporate boardrooms. "Why bring me here now?" Ethan asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous, steady register. "Because my father had a stroke 6 months ago, leaving me the company," Serafina explained, her voice urgent. "When I discovered Valkyrie, I tried to dismantle it, but Caldwell locked me out. The physical servers beneath Tremont are heavily shielded and hardwired. They can only be accessed manually. Caldwell is wiping the data tonight and moving the servers. I need the evidence on those drives to destroy him and avenge your wife. But the sub-basement is protected by a biometric and structural failsafe. My father designed it so that any forced entry would flood the chamber." She stepped closer, handing him a secure tablet. "You are the only structural engineer alive who can read my father's blueprints and figure out how to bypass the failsafe. But Caldwell knows you're here. His private security team entered the lobby 2 minutes ago. We need to move." A sudden, muffled thump echoed from the floor below, followed by the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed the tablet, shoved his laptop into his messenger bag, and followed Serafina out the side exit. They bypassed the main elevators, taking the maintenance stairwell. The descent was a blur of concrete and echoing footsteps. On the 30th floor, the stairwell door violently burst open. 2 men in tactical gear stepped into the landing, raising suppressed submachine guns. Serafina didn't flinch. She raised her pistol and fired twice. The silenced shots were dull thwips in the enclosed space. Both men dropped instantly. Ethan stared in shock, his heart hammering against his ribs. "My father insisted on an expensive education," Serafina said coldly, stepping over the bodies. "Keep moving." They reached the underground parking garage where a sleek, armored black SUV was waiting. Thomas, the rigidly polite assistant, was in the driver's seat, an assault rifle resting across his lap. "Get in!" Thomas barked, entirely dropping his corporate facade. Tires squealed against the concrete as Thomas gunned the engine, smashing through the automated toll barrier and rocketing into the slick, rain-soaked streets of Boston. The Tremont Tower was only 10 blocks away, but a pair of dark sedans was already aggressively tailing them, weaving recklessly through the late-night traffic. "Ethan, the blueprints!" Serafina yelled over the roar of the engine. "How do we get inside the bunker without triggering the flood protocol?" Ethan frantically swiped across the tablet, zooming in on the Tremont Foundation schematics. The math and lines began to align in his mind. He saw the genius and the paranoia of Arthur Harrington's design. "The main blast door is rigged to water mains," Ethan said, his eyes darting across the screen. "If you tamper with the lock, it opens the valves. But look here, the ventilation intake shafts. They run parallel to the city's old subway tunnels. If we access the maintenance grate in the abandoned Green Line spur, we can drop directly into the server room through the HVAC system. It bypasses the door entirely." "Thomas, reroute," Serafina commanded. "Get us to the Boylston transit access." Gunfire erupted, shattering the SUV's reinforced back window. A spiderweb of cracked glass obscured Ethan's view, but he pulled his bag close to his chest, his mind locked onto one singular thought. Chloe. He had to survive this. He had to finish this for Hannah and get back to his little girl. With a brutal swerve, Thomas slammed the brakes, sending the SUV skidding into an alleyway beside a chained-off subway maintenance hatch. "Go!" Thomas shouted, laying down, suppressing fire, out the window as the sedans screeched to a halt behind them. "I'll hold them off!" Serafina grabbed Ethan's arm, hauling him toward the rusty grate. With a heavy crowbar from her trench coat, she snapped the rusted padlock. Together, they plunged into the damp, rat-infested darkness of the abandoned tunnels, leaving the echoing gunfire behind them. The descent into the Tremont bunker was suffocating. They crawled through 40 yards of narrow, dust-choked ventilation shafts before Ethan finally kicked out the reinforced iron grate. They dropped 15 feet down onto the cold, steel floor of the Valkyrie server room. The chamber was massive, bathed in the eerie, pulsing blue light of dozens of towering server racks. The low hum of the cooling units vibrated in Ethan's teeth. This was the dark heart of Richard Caldwell's empire. The reason his wife, Hannah, was dead. Serafina rushed to the central console, immediately plugging a heavy decryption drive into the mainframe. "I'm initiating the download. I need exactly 4 minutes to pull the ledger data." Ethan, however, was drawn to a secondary terminal in the corner. He opened his laptop, still wirelessly connected to the hidden Croft root directory, and clicked on the video file he had found right before they fled the office. Hannah's face appeared on the screen. Ethan gasped, his knees threatening to buckle. She looked exactly as she had the morning she died, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her eyes bright and fierce. "Ethan," her recorded voice echoed softly through the speakers. "If you are watching this, it means I'm gone. And it means you found the breadcrumbs I left for you." Tears blurred Ethan's vision. "I found out what Harrington and Caldwell are doing beneath Tremont," Hannah continued, her voice trembling slightly but laced with iron resolve. "They know I know. They're going to silence me. I couldn't risk them coming after you and Chloe, so I did the only thing I could. I weaponized your brilliance, my love." Hannah smiled sadly. 3 years ago, you designed the load-bearing retrofits for this garage. You complained to me that the client forced you to use a substandard alloy for the primary western pillar. That wasn't the client. It was me. I forged the work order. I created a catastrophic structural weak point in the bunker's ceiling. If Caldwell ever tries to purge these servers, he has to manually override the cooling systems. The western pillar cannot withstand the thermal expansion. If you spike the server temperatures, the pillar will buckle. The Charles River aquifer above it will collapse, burying this room under 10,000 tons of water. Protect our little bug, Ethan. I love you. A heavy metallic thud suddenly echoed through the chamber. The massive steel blast doors at the front of the room hissed. "They bypassed the flood protocol," Serafina yelled, drawing her gun. The doors blew open with a deafening explosion. Smoke poured into the room, followed immediately by a hail of automatic gunfire. Sparks showered down as bullets ripped through the server racks. Serafina fired back, diving behind the central console, but a bullet grazed her shoulder, staining her couture coat crimson. Through the smoke, Richard Caldwell stepped into the chamber, flanked by heavily armed mercenaries. "Serafina," Caldwell boomed, his voice dripping with condescension. "Did you really think you could tear down what we built? Kill them! Wipe the drives!" The mercenaries advanced, laying down relentless fire. They had seconds left. Ethan looked at the structural pillar on the western wall. He looked at the server terminal. He knew exactly what he had to do. Hannah hadn't just given him closure, she had given him the detonator. "Serafina!" Ethan screamed over the gunfire. "Unplug the drive. It's not finished. Unplug it now. Trusting him, Serafina ripped the heavy drive from the console. Ethan's fingers flew across his laptop. He accessed the Valkyrie cooling network, bypassed the safeties, and typed in the override command. Target: main cooling turbines. Status: override. Heat output: 400%. Immediately, the low hum of the servers transformed into a deafening, high-pitched shriek. Red emergency lights began spinning frantically. "What did you do?" Caldwell shouted, looking around in panic. "I'm an engineer, Caldwell," Ethan yelled, his eyes burning with a fierce, vengeful light. "I fix things, and this building is fundamentally flawed." A horrific, groaning crack echoed through the chamber. The massive western pillar, the one Ethan had unwittingly designed to fail, began to glow red from the ambient heat of the overheating servers. Hairline fractures spider-webbed up the reinforced concrete. "The roof is giving way," one of the mercenaries screamed, dropping his weapon and bolting for the door. "Run!" Ethan grabbed Serafina by her uninjured arm, hauling her toward the ventilation grate. The structural integrity of the room was failing exponentially. Chunks of concrete began raining down. Ethan hoisted Serafina up into the shaft, then jumped, grabbing the ledge just as the western pillar violently buckled. With a sound like a bomb detonating, the ceiling collapsed. Millions of gallons of pressurized water from the aquifer above smashed into the room, obliterating the server racks, the mainframes, and Richard Caldwell in an unstoppable deluge of debris and water. Ethan scrambled up the shaft, pulling Serafina with him as the water surged upward, stopping just inches below their boots as the pressure equalized. They lay on the cold floor of the subway tunnel, gasping for air. Below them, Caldwell's criminal emperor was permanently entombed. Serafina clutched her bleeding shoulder, holding up the blinking decryption drive. "We got enough of the data," she breathed, a genuine smile breaking across her face. "It's over." 6 months later, Ethan Cole stood on the balcony of his new architectural firm, overlooking the Boston harbor. The morning air was crisp. Behind him, inside the sunlit office, Chloe sat at a massive drafting table, happily coloring. She hadn't needed her inhaler in months. The Tremont bunker data had sent shock waves across the globe. The Department of Justice had indicted Caldwell's remaining syndicate members, dismantled Harrington Global, and seized its assets. Serafina had walked away free, having successfully destroyed her father's dark legacy. Her final act as CEO was ensuring Ethan's contract was honored. The massive consulting severance funded his new firm, but more importantly, the DOJ investigation publicly cleared Ethan's name, exposing the sabotage of Interstate 89. His engineering license was fully reinstated. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Serafina. "They just broke ground on the new children's hospital. I hear the lead architect is quite talented." "Coffee tomorrow?" Ethan smiled, typing back. "Yes." He walked back inside, leaning over Chloe's desk. "What are you drawing, Bug?" She held up a crayon drawing of a massive, vibrant bridge. "It's a bridge," she said proudly, "but a safe one that never falls down." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "That's right, sweetie. One that never falls down. Would you have risked everything, even your life, to uncover the truth about a loved one's death? Or would you have taken the money and walked away?" Ethan's harrowing journey from a desperate single father to the man who brought down a billionaire syndicate proves that the truth can't stay buried forever. If this story of betrayal, sacrifice, and justice kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more pulse-pounding, real-life dramas. What would you do in Ethan's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.